Hi guys, so this is my WEB701 milestone free walkthrough. I'm just going to walk through and demonstrate my applications for the final hand-in. Of course, my project turned into two separate applications, a Express.js server in the back end and a Vue web app for the front end in the client server model. So first of all, I'm going to show you the Express API service and also setting up the database that, of course, the Express service connects to. So I'm going to jump online. Now, this is my repo for the Express REST API service. You need to be on the Milestone free branch, which you should be by default if you're using my links out of the report that I've submitted. Now, all your details of what this application is, the features that it has, and how to install it and then run it are all available here in the README on the Milestone free branch. Now, essentially, the first thing you're going to want to do is actually to clone a copy of this repo to your local device. Once you have one of those, and bear with me a moment as I do the equivalent. Okay. Now you'll save it obviously wherever you would normally save it. So first thing to do is go into your database script file here. Now this is essentially a MySQL file that holds the entire script that I've used to create my database, populate it with dummy data, and also several stored procedures. So if we just open that up and grab everything out of it, just Control A, Control C. Now I'm just going to open MySQL Workbench. Bear with me one moment as that fires up. Okay, jump in. Now, so first thing, we need a new query tab, which can just be created like so. Now, copy and paste all of that MySQL that's come out of the database script there. Now, select it and run it. And you can see everything's run. We've had no errors there. Now, if I just refresh my schema, here's my database. The database has tables, and my tables have dummy data in them. So that's everything that we're going to need there. We'll just minimize this for the moment and minimize that for the moment and close that. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so now we have a database. So to open the Express service, now I'm using Visual Studio Code as my code editor. You may be using something different, ideally as long as you have a terminal integrated into your code editor. Now, fortunately, I've actually opened mine right on the project, but if yours doesn't open on the project, just File, Open Folder, and navigate to wherever your directory is that you've cloned from the repo, and just select that folder. And of course, this is already open, so but here we are. Okay, so now essentially everything lives in this one file, the app.js. So this is essentially where my configuration is for my HTTP requests and everything like that. And it's also where all of my APIs live. So these are all API routes down here handling a variety of things. We'll look at those a little bit more in a moment. Just wanted to touch on these. So essentially these variables here refer to a lot of the npm packages that I've imported and implemented to just give myself that additional functionality. For example, CORS enables my HTTP requests and gives them some configuration that means they're not dropped as a CORS error. MySQL enables me to create a connection to the MySQL database. Morgan provides me with information in my terminal about the HTTP requests that are coming in. So essentially they're all living in this node modules folder here, and you can see there's body parser, for example, there's CORS, So these are where all your imported NPM files go. I'm just pointing this out because this is something that I touched on in my Milestone free report as an emerging technology was the use of NPM packages for additional functionality. So if you're curious, that's where they all live. Anyway, I digress. Now, to use these variables, so essentially Morgan require Morgan means that this is a variable, like an instance of Morgan with access to all the functionality that it has. The same with SQL, body parser, Express. So how it works, for most of them, we actually just apply an instance of this variable to an instance of this app. So I'm applying cause to the app. I'm applying Morgan to the app, body parser to the app. So whenever I use an instance of app, it already has access to the services being provided by, say, Morgan or cause, which is a really easy way to do it. It's very quick and easy for some things. Say for a cause, for example, that cause could have been applied just individually to specific HTTP routes, or it could have been customized much more heavily so that those routes were only allowed for, say, a specific device. So it, for this example, I just did a very open. Cause is just enabled throughout the application. In a real world scenario, I suspect you'd be much more tight on that. And for the MySQL, we're essentially here, I'm using a function to return an instance of MySQL's create connection, and that instance holds this configuration information. Now, this is what's going to allow us to communicate directly with MySQL. So, and this is very relevant for whoever's testing. You may need to come in here and you're definitely going to need to adjust the password and potentially the user, the port. Essentially, this configuration here, information here, will need to match what you have on your local device. So I doubt you have the same password as I do. You will have the same database name, probably the same host, potentially the same port. I think that's just the MySQL Workbench default, but you'll need to check that you've got the right password and the right user in here. So feel free to edit that to match your local device, and hopefully that will avoid any issues. So we're just going to fire this up now. So we're just going to use nodemon and use it to open app.js. Okay, and so straight away, REST API service is up and running. Now, if I want to just test this quickly, I can just go to my browser, open a window. Now, if I just use this route here, which is referring to, you can see here my server's running on port 333. So if I go to localhost port 333, essentially I'm talking directly to my server. So we'll just test the concept. And here we can see we're getting our message that our REST API service is running, which is of course this message here. Now, if I want to take it a little bit further and check that I am actually accessing my database, you'll see below the initial configurations here at the top of the document, I have all of my API routes. Now, all the routes have basically an example route here. Some of them may be a little bit redundant or something, but generally they're there for testing. So if I just copy and paste that one and just run that directly into my browser here, perfect. You can see I'm returning a whole bunch of user data. Now, all of this data is just coming straight out of my MySQL database. I'm literally just saying, give me all the user information. So basically, as proof of concept, I now know that my express.js REST API service is running, and I know is available, and I know that it's accessing my MySQL database. Now, essentially, at this point, I don't really need to do anything more with that. It's essentially there, listening and available. So I'll just run through the APIs that I've got here quickly, and then the next stage, of course, for you will to be go to the other repo, grab the view web application and get that up and running, and then the two will talk to each other, and via the view web application you're going to be using these HTTP API requests to the express.js API service, which is going to access the MySQL database. So it's a little bit roundabout, but it's very cool and seems to work quite well. Okay, so just to give you an idea, this is a basic GET request here. Now, essentially, I'm just, oops, a little bit too big. Okay, so we're using the MySQL connection and we're using the query, passing the query string, which of course is just this actual SQL query here. And this is my route essentially. So you can see app.get literally just translates into local host on port 333 here. Get users is the relevant information. That's the name of this function, if you will. So hence it needs to be appended to my route here. Okay, so essentially we're going to access the database. We're going to pass it in the SQL query, and then we're either going to get an error message if something goes wrong, and then I'm going to log that message and send an error status from my server. Or if we don't, then we're going to get data, and I'm going to just say that it worked and pass the data through. So I've got quite a few GET APIs doing very similar things, a lot of them. Of course, for the web application, I'm doing a lot of lazy loading, so I'm kind of doing things like just get all the users, get all the auctions, and then once I sort of have something like get all the auctions, for example, like this one here, then on the web application on the front end, I'll literally just do something like a loop through the array that I've received from the Express service and just say, right, get all the auctions, loop through them all, and render them all as a list or tiles or whatever you want. So yeah, so there's a kind of get all orchards. So these are all pretty standard sort of things. Generally getting them by the primary key of that table. So for example, I don't know, these ones we're literally just getting everything. Let me see. So here we're actually passing in a parameter, and generally I'll be passing and then using that parameter, sorry, but generally I'll pass in the primary key of the table and then use it to say something like this MySQL query where I'm get everything from the user table where the username equals question mark. Question mark refers to username. So essentially it's the past username that I've passed in with my HTTP request from the web client. So essentially I've sent, in fact, there's a perfect example. I've sent this to this function, and then I've appended a username to it. In fact, I don't think it's even a user anymore. I suspect you'd want that one there or something like that. Okay, but sorry, I digress. Let me see. So loads and loads of get functions. Now, some of the more interesting ones. So, for example, here I needed a average price from a auction table. So my SQL query is a little bit more involved, where I'm asking, give me the sum of the auction reserves, name it reserve, because otherwise it will just return it named sum, and that causes a lot of issues on the other end if you have your data being returned has names that are kind of like function names or reserved words such as sum and brackets and stuff. It'll absolutely cause you chaos on the other end. So renaming it as just something generic is the way to go. From the auction table where the variety name equals this name. So essentially I'm just getting the aggregated reserve amount from this table and doing a similar thing here with weight. In the actual web application, I'll touch on this again when it comes up as to where I'm actually using these. Let me see. And doing a few more interesting things with get. So here, this is actually my user authentication, for example. So I'm passing in a username and a password to this function from the front end. And then I'm actually calling a stored procedure in MySQL to run. And in fact, just demonstrate that because, so I'll just clear that out of the way. So in my query here, and in fact we're down the bottom of the page, I believe that's, yep, that's the function there. So you can see I just pass in that that procedure call of call login with a username and a password. Then this literally goes through and says, right, do a count of passwords where username and password match, and if I have a match, send back a success message. If I don't have a match, send back a fail. And essentially that's my user authentication. On the front end, I catch that success or fail message as a kind of Boolean value, and then that enables me to either let my users in or to kick them out with a error message. Okay, but back into there. So yeah, so we've got a few of these more complicated get methods that use these stored procedure calls. Also, username check, just when a user registers and creates a new user record, of course, the username is the primary key of the table, so I can't have a double up of primary keys. So yeah, just using that one there to ensure that a username that a user is trying to submit is not one that's already in at the table. If it is, of course, it'll throw an error. Otherwise, it'll just say it's record. Now, I've got couple of posts here where I'm creating let me see, so that's a new user. Excuse me. So that's the register user function. And then, of course, we also have a new auction. Now, I've got to admit, these are quite messy. I'm passing in all of these variables, and it's not necessarily the best practice. Ideally, I just actually wanted to pass in an array, like a single object that had all this information in it, but I did sort of hit a few issues with that, so I had to give up on that and just kind of go with the messier way of doing it, but one that I actually found worked on the day. So that's probably something I'd refactor in the future if I had the time. Okay, but yeah, so a couple of post methods there. And also a patch where the users can edit their user account information. So of course we've got a patch to handle that. And there's a delete in here just from when I was initially setting this up. I had to, of course, test the concept and make sure things worked. A couple of empty methods there for testing. But yeah, that basically sums up what the Express REST API service is doing. Essentially, it's just sitting here providing access to all of these APIs that, of course, provide access to information and procedures within my database, and then they're called by my Vue web application. So I'll just wind this up here, and my advice would be to then now go to the Vue application repo and follow the video there to download and get that up and running, and yeah, we'll go from there. Cool. Hope you enjoyed.